pleasure and the honor to be able to welcome Geshe Beri Jigme, a great scholar of Tibetan literature, an expert in poetry, and someone who's now visiting our country and is offering us the opportunity to tell us about his work, but also his life. And this was an idea that came when we discussed what could be presented here, and Lelung, who kindly facilitated the connection, we were kind of discussing what was suitable for this audience, which is varied with people coming from all the various corners of Inner Asia, and actually engaging with life accounts, the story of a life, and how this relates to the literature experience and to poetry in particular, is possibly an interesting opportunity. And so Geshe he was born in Tibet, in the Ganze area, and then came to India, where he became a very prominent scholar, and he is currently working at Sanat University in India. And he published numerous books and articles, so with a deep engagement with Tibetan language, and especially poetic language, which is fascinating. With us, we have Nga'a Jigme, who is a PhD candidate at SOAS, and he's going to assist us as a translator. So he's going to be the great translator, the Lotsawa Chempo, of this speech. So, Rinpoche, to you.
Namasar Tomala, Sandrashi Dele Shugi, then Zamli told Chinyara Chewe, Lord Chembo, then Cambridge to Lord Chembo no Lene, and a Tamshes or Ashumba de Narang in the Siena, Ketchembo Shiratsugi, and a Tiriganzo de la Codizong Edigati Cho, the Tebe, then the Tamshi Ying Marine Dramada, Jahan Dramada, and Momo Pella, Samalang here, Santa the Tashi Dele Shugi.
So first of all, I want to say hello to everyone and have this kind of opportunity to give a talk in this world-renowned university. I take it very serious and feel very honored. So first of all, I would like to say thank you to Dr. Hedegaard, the main organizer of this event, and also the participants from all different kinds of all different countries.
And number Solia, Gonsi Shugueti, Carasana Nagi, Injike Jashime, and it's just a teacher in the Jimbungo, where Chagi. When Injike Jamanga Joy Kwakaya, Shu Rabi, in a Injike Jomoyoma, Trianga, Kemashi Tone, what's our Buddhist?
So first need to apologize to everybody that I cannot speak English, so it takes time to do this kind of translation. Actually, I got an opportunity to learn English, but during the time I didn't study well, so I feel a little bit quite shameful that I cannot speak English. So first, I apologize to everybody. If I can speak English, then maybe I can speak less and take less time. But since I cannot do that, so it takes a longer time, and maybe you guys might feel a little bit bored in between. So today my topic is mainly based on two parts. The first part is about my life, and the second part is about my poetry. First, I would like to talk about my life, and about my life, I will in a little bit, how to say, joking ways to share about my life.
nga shewa le sa de langren no ji sa chen bu de ma re la inlan no ji ja ha de ge da chen bu ma re xin ba long ba ku chu ji no xie ju bu ji.
The place that I was born is not like London, it's not like England. I was born in a rural area and as a farmer's kid.
ane chungchu ko la lotan do sa ka ka ya bo chung yo ma re jun se nga rene sa je ka bu ji de de chane chung yu mu ri ji rene sa je ka bu yi chane nga ane jai shi che de so ya ko me.
When I was a child, I didn't get a good chance to go to school because it's during the time of Cultural Revolution. So because of this, I didn't get a good chance to learn Chinese.
Ka te di nga zo bu chu yu ka cho wa da ane ko yu de ge bu chu yu ka cho wa ka ka de nga zo bu chu yu ka yi na ane dong ba chu ti ya de go ma re na xia na tu shu de se ge ma re na xia na tu shu de de ji ni shi de ji ni shi de zo wa cha si de ya de ji shi de na pa ra chen pu de shi de na pa ra de shi de nga zo tu shi be ba chung hong ne nyo go ma re tu shi be ba so su bo ti de ho re.
When I was a child, the feeling and the environment is quite different with you guys. When I was a child, we don't use tissue paper when we blow our nose. We just use hand. So first use right hand, you first use left hand, and when your both hands are full, then you use clothes. So you don't really need to buy a tissue paper from the store. Your clothes is your tissue paper.
차시 진주에서 하장 동거래 라무 생각이 시다 요마 리나 가서 보고 주가라 라무지요 때 가르서나 나도 막 가디 사나데 라무요 칼라야 사와 나도 막 사와 년도지 강론전 때서 라무요래 그 이제 당초
When I was child, the political situation is quite serious at that time. So we don't really have freedom. But the only freedom we have is when you smell nose, you can put whatever you want. So when you smell your nose and when you're eating, it comes together.
다도 라무 텔리치지요 그래서 안에 가서 보고 주주가라 로자로디 고도게 카다데서 야고 요 말했어. 안에 제사 보고 중중고 안에 그파 진바 파운데 갈 고도 카다치 뛰어 마타 안에 고도노 진바 도야 대 nenza saba mara juden res ande chenata kodon chimba kaze ton teso ramu yo res.
During the time our the pants, the belt is not really good, so it's very difficult to take out. So when we want to pee, we just pee inside the pants. So your pants become like quite wet, and this is the freedom that we have.
그래서 나도 중중가라 라모 내사기 로마지 시에버려 이나 미세가 라모 카시카시 요래.
So although we say we was born in a place that with no freedom, but still we can have this kind of little bit freedom.
아니 나도 중중가라 로자는 로약원에 로지에데 디카라 로잔 조고 두스 이나 영가 로 두콜이야. 자지시 로제 있으네. 담이 로자는 조이. 딩이 돌아 베베로 두래. 베베로 두인데 인지도 지나로 주래. 나 로주가 돌아 로자가 같이 와 있어.
A lot of time actually we need to go to school when we reach 8 years old. But I went to school when I was 7. I was cheated and I went to school when I was 7. Actually, a lot of time I was 7 years old according to the Tibetan calendar. But if we use the English style to count, it should be like 6 years old.
안에 기계기 나부토레게 가르치나 나텔라 기토조금에 나르트데 돌아 로리게요. 변디요. 로리 변디다니 캄바든지 진마도 기계 코레게 가르쳐가는 게 다시메.
So a lot of time, no matter what teacher write on the blackboard, I write analysis on my notebook. I just looking, the light and the house, whatever I want, I draw on my notebook.
근데 디렉션으로 나서 파리모레 아니 미소미를 로서 나쁘고 주시래 지마냐는 지리테는 느기 로고 때데 내야라 정모요래 저 너무 좋아하네요. 거라서 그냥 뭔가 지는 느기 로초래.
Since I was far from the school, so a lot of time some kids just they went earlier, and I said I will come later. So this is the freedom we have. They can go by their own, they go first, but I can come later on.
간다 tradition에다 자미 로찬을 코쇼 와쇼 리시 롱지 우리 진즈 대소 간가 지 정비空气버레스.
But anyway, a lot of time, in the Chinese school, we still have a chance to learn about chemistry, history, and other subjects.
科学、化学、伦理、科学、
science,
农技、政治、物理、自然上是
physics, 物理，
是刚刚进入大学的，那个没给这知识的那个讲你是那个拉头的，新牛是那个拉有么的。
So when people ask me, did you learn it? Yes, I learned. But do you understand about that? No, I don't understand.
Tene ka tedi pe jong sa ko yo ma re ina na ko ka ya shu ji ka ra the yo re sa na ngai na ge pa ba pe ya po yi pa ge chin na pe ya po jong ya ra su.
But a lot of time we don't really have the opportunity to learn the Tibetan. But what is fortunate is I have a father who is very good at Tibetan, so I learned the Tibetan language from my own father.
근데 이처럼 아주 중배 나라 코인을 베이싱에 요마르다 베이싱에 깡치인데 나차 버려 이나에 베이시와데 레하고지는 심해 내 바바데 그 동야라 자다 명예기 바오지.
So a lot of time in our village there's no one can speak Tibetan. Maybe I'm the only one who knows the Tibetan, but it's not an easy way to learn Tibetan a lot of time because my father is the one who always beat the children to teach. So his style of teaching is by beating.
那就不出去过了，不出去爬起了，接着这个转几点点了，炸起水水似的，看谁气炸有似的，看谁动这炸个似的，俺几点多了线路插手的扒了意思。
So when we ask our friends, who is the one you afraid the most in this world? And some people say, "Oh, I afraid the dogs." Some afraid the dogs, but I afraid about my father. I afraid my father.
刚才他出去过的，他别的在你看中云里的，他电子系别接了呢，司机可能逃过来，司机可能跟小别的呢，司机可能超过，司机可能超过接了，但那个南起用啥个高干学，但那年俺都是大的是，但那讲没意思。
So when I was a child, anyway, I learned Tibetan and Chinese a little bit. And after the political situation improved slightly, then I got a chance to study Buddhist philosophy and about Tibetan poetry. So this is the first chapter of my life. Then follow up is the second chapter that I start to traveling to other countries. Then I reached Tibet, reached India, reached Jibong monastery. Then I start to study this Tibetan and Buddhism.
로종 깔레 치슈 데데 진바이 아니 무슨 말 삼바 치슈 데디 무슨 말 강에 치슈 데디.
And that was the time that the most difficult in my life, most difficult on study, also most difficult in my life.
아니 칼라 사야기 저거 맞아야 참서야 추동야라메 저 칼라데서 타리 뭔로 아니 소외토로 강에 가져야 무슨 너 삼바시슈 시대생에 단 hin조생에 엄마한테 가와요 세나 군배 놀이에.
So this is the most difficult time. Sometimes you cannot get enough food, and when you need to take the water for drink, it takes long distance to get. So actually, this is the most difficult time about my livelihood. Yeah, so far, it is the time that I stay in monastery. So this is the second chapter of my life.
The happiest time is also in the monastery.
Which is happiest times also in the monastery.
Peaceful.
So when I entering the second chapter of my life, I was walking to enter the second chapter, and when I'm entering the third chapter, I take airplane to entering the third chapter. So I was served as a teacher on history at Indiana University in the US. So from then on, I have taught history in the different countries and joined the conference and giving speech. But I never think that I will stay in the Western country, in the rest of my life. So the reason is I just want to stay as a monk and something beyond a Buddhist monk that I never think about that.
The reason is he don't have a gut to come out of the monk and have no strength or ability or talent to serve as lay people.
So then after that, I returned back to India. So I served as a professor in the several universities. Also, I edited the biography of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and also I wrote several books, around like 30 books. So yeah, this is so far what I have done in my life. Actually, my intention was to become a Geshe, and after that, I focused on Dharma practice and stay in the retreat practice. But somehow I become like a teacher and teaching poetry, teaching literature in the universities, and then this is what my time that I spent. So this is something brief about my life. Because of time limit, so that's what I can share so far. Otherwise, in my life, there's lots of stories and jokes that I can share about. And now I will talk about my poetry briefly. In our Tibetan poetry, there are many three types in our Tibetan poetry.
얘가 담보대 미비냐가 됐어.
The first type is the ancestral, we can say ancestral Tibetan poetry.
미비냐. 이바데 소주냐가 됐어.
And the second type is, we can say, classical Tibetan poetry.
스바데 짱이 사바레스.
And the third type is modern Tibetan poetry.
디나네 미비 짱베데 베체 동에 쪼데 이를 자체 만소레스. 신소 배와 자체 만소레스.
Within these three types, the first type, the ancestral Tibetan poetry, which is the poetry that used by grassroots, by the regular people, grassroots, yeah.
근데 소주기 짱베데 베체 동에 쪼쳐데 신의제가 만하다. 근데 치바만한테 소레스 취존의 신의제.
And the second type, the classical Tibetan poetry, mainly used by those who are highly educated and also the experts in the Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist practice.
근데 스마트함이 사바데 디라기 호주대 소다 시시대 소레스.
And the third type, modern Tibetan poetry, is mainly used by the students and also the younger generations.
근데 나단 행아 미비냐가 바기 저완도 디스슈비스.
So now I would like to share briefly about my relation with this ancestral Tibetan poetry.
미비냐가기 이자초데 대바기 난타테소 로와즈모 난타다 논사리엠 난타다 근데 리케사 중테소레스.
The ancestral Tibetan poetry mainly are based on the Tibetan biographies and also like tell stories of the Linkesar.
근데 디나네 리케사 중테소 투투바레 하장이 림보레스.
The Linkesar story is not only like a showpiece, it's with very profound and long stories.
아네 리케사 조당 프랑스게 나폴리가 모셔를 좀더나 콘서트도 투투투레 리케사 동다 하장 림보레스. 나폴리 프랑스
Napoli.
맞지.
Yeah. So when you compare with the Linkesar's story, Linkesar was a kind of fighting god. Yeah. So when you compare about the Linkesar story with the Napoleon's story, Linkesar story is much longer and more profound than that.
그래서 근데 되게 놀러라 베베기 파워기 냠 근데 마지야 냠 안에 베베 좀 소화다 하장이 저와 띠사보요레스.
So in the Linkesar story, there's very deep and profound meanings on fighting, fighters, and the war in Tibetan society.
되게 수지의 원은 가서 베베 머리 놓는 이 개사가 좀더 다 돼서 소치어도 가 다가 요래서는 강도 안도 콜라 다가 요래서.
And this kind of Linkesar story are very popular in many Kham and Amdo area.
Also in Mongolia.
예, 몽골리아
Sobo Yangji
예. 아니 된디기 수지의 원에 강도 안도 미나 로호 첨보다 빠자게보다 상살이야 따르자야기 수지라고 되어 소시어들이 계속 중에 주는
So that's why the people from Kham and Amdo are very brave and short temper, can fighting with people in any time is mainly because of this kind of Linkesar story, influenced by these kind of stories.
근데 칸도 안디 미쳐야 야로라 미기 라자 사나데 미기 라자 수셔서야 근데 이게 수치대 조셔리 계산을 좀 내려버리스.
라자 생각이지.
라자 사나
너 self-expected 봐.
다 전주도 지기지라 linju 깨자 가르치는 깨자도 다다 대봐.
So the I don't know how to say that.
keep the promise.
People think cannot actually say that cannot lose the face.
It's of honor.
Honor.
Have
Their
to-
dignity
honor.
and
Self-honor is the most important.
Yes.
yeah.
In modern literature, it's categorized as heroic epics.
Hero epics. Yeah.
Yeah.
맞대모스 그래서 대체 안에 제사 텐디 총바래 다 비비기 미비짱비 그노로네 로아 좀만다 무사게도 남타 첨부 제요래 대수 조치어데 가 다리요래서는 위도 좀 커라 야 다리요래서
So in the ancestral Tibetan poetry, mainly there are Droa Sammo and
무사게도
Nosa Gembo
Last
that
one.
are mainly how to say popular in the Yuzhang area, Lhasa area.
텐디 이슈지에 원에 해석다 위장 뭐서 때서 계좌시도 논적 강가 신잠라고도 차이되고 표시 텐디기 수지 인지해서
So that's why Lhasa Yuzhang people when they are talking, they are kind of more how to say humble and peaceful in their style. Maybe it's because of the influence by this kind of poetry.
그래서 담자니션에 먼저 베베기 미비기 장리의 베베기 신송 초와다 하장기 저와 카타니 모요래서
So that's why I say this kind of Tibetan poetry, ancestral Tibetan poetry, is highly influenced in our Tibetan society.
되네 안에 베베 미비 저리 때라 미세기 치치 가려요래서나 라고 말해 이기시고 말해 라고 말해 보고 춘추 고네고 신소 소와도 년도 랑치코라 신이 차기를 했어.
So this kind of ancestral Tibetan poetry is something that you don't really need to teach, and even you don't need to know how to read the letters. The small kids can learn it just by themselves. When they get together, when they listen, they can just understand by themselves.
안줄로 자카 현다 스킬이메 머리 현다 스킬이메 비치지지요 가르세나 베베기 지르기 찜소 놀로라 땡카 dum반다 아니 때 가르 땡카레야 신카모야 오만조야 자체 몽소노 레카 춤추 가리소나 레카티 잘로라 냥아다 룰레야요 그래서
And this is something that specialty of Tibetan people, different with other countries. Even we're doing some small works like farming or making milks. This kind of small works, backside of this kind of small works, they all have their own poetry behind.
네 차지지나 근데게 시작하기 동서서 이나가 깨라야 보면 되네 디제 뒤도마도 뭐가 땅에서 말해서
No. Actually, I can share more about that, but because I'm not good at English language, so I cannot put more time to share about this. Yeah.
Voice is not good.
깨야 보면 나 되네 나 동해야 보면 동서 말해서 되네 나라 되네 미비니가 돈에 자체 가르쳐 내 국가 가르라고 해서 바바 충충권에 나타 제도 리종대 소마라시 차고로 주니스 근데 있잖아 다 미비저에게 뭐지라 내가 가서 국가야 보라 있어.
And I got a very good opportunity to study the ancestral Tibetan poetry because of my father asked me to read those biography and epics stories. So I get a good opportunity to learn about that.
땅에서 비비점이게 니바 소주 정리다 예 바로 저한테 수비 있어.
And now I would like to talk about my relationship with the second type of the poetry, the classical Tibetan poetry.
근데 소주 조리 조사대 자간이 수용바래서
The place I learned the classical Tibetan poetry is in India. When I reach India, then I start to learn the classical Tibetan poetry.
근데
Classical poetry come from India.
sorry. 근데 좀바도 조치하데 사체 밴드다 건가자서 좀바니 고추지네 다 베베기 놀러라 짱리 사바데 공주치네 좀바레스.
And it was started by Sagapenta Konga Gyatsen, during his time, he bring in this kind of new style of literature to Tibet.
Zambi Sabbat Beli Shuni, Chacha Gazi Shung Yoresana, Zambi Shibon Dig Tola, Zari Jende Jayada, Zori Limo Levala, Deva Kansiki Yo Mares and Negi, Papa Chimbit on the shade to East. Mazugi, Suju, Zorin Degi, Taso Chimbo Bella Shomba, the Zongte, then Karsagore, Zambi. So you sorry in the young chair, Yonki, Mimon Boogie, Yondon de Yonki, the Ditabo, Pevana Shanda Sitila, Choyo Maris.
Somebody,
Somebody the
classical poems since I arrived in Tibet. I'm proudly could say that the Tibetan is the most rich in the classical poems, and they can they have so many different melodies, and also with the groups, the singings, and so on and so forth. It's bars.
To give some examples. For example, in Tibetan poetry, that was some poetry are chanted by thousands of people, and this will never be seen in different culture in this world. So, for example, in the Sela, Jibung, Ganden Monastery, we have lots of people monks gathering together to recite the prayers, and those prayers are mainly the poetry, the Tibetan poetry. And not only just recite those prayers, we recite this prayer with the tunes. So thousands of people gathering together and recite these verses with tunes. Maybe this can only be seen in the Tibetan society, not in other places. And not only reciting with tunes, it also comes with drum beats and cymbals and other musical instruments. Maybe this is only you can only see this situation in the Tibetan society. In the three main monastery, we have people gathering together and recite these verses. Every sentence, with the tunes, And now I want to give an example to show a little bit. Since I'm aged and long time didn't do this kind of chanting, so maybe cannot chant very good, but just want to show you. So thousands, 10,000s of people that reciting this kind of tunes together. And reciting and
Don't read. Dharm is come to like rhythm. Yang says singing.
Sing tunes. So this is first time reading one.
파세디가 데레 파나시 라이조에 자위에 소소에 말리 얼보에 콘도에 저요 자위에 제저에 소시에 게레 근주에 시에 예제에 전제에 라미에 소노에 별라 양세
And this is the tunes. This is the second type, like rhythm.
양세대 다 림보케라데 오이 데라 양세
And this is the third type. The tunes is like a much longer one.
베베 냐나 데서 냐나자 마임바타 미세게 코드 뇽도 아니 동타키 자로라 동야도 뭐야.
So Tibetan poetry is not only on the poetry itself. It comes with this kind of tunes and rhythms, and also on top of that you have like drum beats and cymbals all together. The horns, long horns.
Yeah.
다도 냐나라 시외게 톤을 줘야 제베 톤을 줘야 왕게 톤을 줘야 차비 톤을 줘야 시제 온차게 냐나 문자부터 줘야.
And this kind of poetry can be, used in 4 kinds of different activities: the peaceful, the increasing, the power, and conquering. Yeah, activities.
대소 지바지 보면 미련비 깔이야 동대가랑 동비 깔이야 차비 남바태야 시외 남바태야 가하요.
And when you do the drum beats, in the peaceful way, in the roseful way, that's different.
Then 인세징의 링이다.
Then Geshe is going to show an example.
반된 하면서 잡고지 되게 양진 탱기.
He's going to recite the tunes of Baden Lamo as kind of protect deity.
Those 동번에 뷰디드가리 뷰지 동 아니 그 동치래 차치래 조 하하이 시제룬게 고로이 르나츠마 보와나 잡고도 되시대요 오늘.
So this is in the roseful way.
Then 대마세바 간주 땡에 우리 나보다서 한번 생기지 대치도와 대소 나 표주 든지 진행 가서 배발 요리였지. 배발라 실로로 찾아서 요 말에 맞고 해만이 요요래서 한번 알아. 한번지 우리 나보다서 지 내대하시도 알아. 랩이
랩.
난데 ches. 나서 배발에 있는 데서 나서 두가만 데디까 사와 베베베 사와 나게 베베 사와 라차세 베베 사와 베데 베베 사와 테테 베베 제가 전주차 나중 미리 되게 리네데 쇼로 파 찾아서야 니빠게 당게 요 말에 맞고 정리 리네다 내가 리네 책에 소문에 토버해라 주고요.
One student asked me, do we have this kind of rap in the Tibetan literature? Actually, we do. For example, for this kind of mantra we chant, it's kind of like rap, but just we not able to make it popular in the foreign country. Otherwise, our we are very rich in our own culture.
냐만게 돼서 양아인베게 총롱지매 디 시살라미 장비게 게게조베디 장비도 천라이로 좀 뭐뭐 때문이니까 다 니쇼베게 장비게 줄이노라 다도 제베연자 아니 소식이 솔로도는 돼서 양아인보다 다 지네 하고 있는 거요. 그래서
before I never thought this is also kind of poetry, but after I studied and also I learned the literature series from the Western, then I realized this is also kind of poetry.
근데 나랑 얘기다 소주기 년하기 거간다데 거간에라 있으나 파윤이라 파동비까지라 때비 야보 흉바다 근데 배치기게 넘어서 까지라 때인지네 농치 줘야라 근데 년아 줘야라 뭔지 되면 뭔지 집어이 근데 손대다 나라기 가수고래 뭐체 노로라다 짱리 망쳐라데 소주 토리 집어이.
So the opportunity that I can learn this classical Tibetan poetry is first because of I studied Tibetan language from my father, and after that from my sutra philosophy teachers, and I learned the Buddhism philosophy and the poetry. So the most composition in my life I was based on this kind of classical Tibetan poetry.
Then 나도 디세 두두 이상 저런데 돌아 신대하고 몸무지대가 심으라고 말이스.
Because of the time limit that I cannot say too much on this part, so yeah, maybe just say here. And
너 되나 저런데 내가 미세게 치치 가려요래서나 따도다 이 쇼루기 망시 때문에 봐다 지체 시기 지체의 하장 체 토본데 돌아 지연도 있어.
So in this kind of classical Tibetan poetry, what's the specialty about it? It's because this kind of poetry contains with the Buddhist thoughts, the philosophic thoughts inside. Also, the word that you use in the poetry is very high-level languages, you can say.
Then 다짜리 선바테나 까망가는 놀시위 있어.
Then to the third type, the modern Tibetan poetry, I will share in 5 minutes.
Then 장리 사바데 나주 배 놀러 지나 then 라라 자시야메 디라 예시 라라 자시야메네 저는 고주 제발이스. 라라 자시
80s,
라라 자시
last century.
So the modern Tibetan poetry is started in the 80s.
then 조치어데 자나기 장리 띠버데 자나기 조리데 조치어데 프랑스라 소베 느쇼베 자리 몽볼 베데네 지바치레스.
And this kind of modern Tibetan poetry is mainly based on the Chinese literature, and the Chinese literature based on the French literature.
then 나주 배 놀러 있는 주제데 배 실로로 제나 안에 장리 사바는 것 중에데 진짜 좀파를 못 지려셔 공기 디라 예시 배라라 든춘데 장리 사바 몽볼 티샤스 좀파를 못 지려.
This is something inside Tibet, and about outside Tibet, it was in the 20th century that Chompa Rinpoche composed lots of this kind of modern Tibetan poetry.
then 나라이나 디라 예시 배라라 그절라 그전에 년나 사바 지하치바 이나데 야고지 힘메스.
And personally, I start this kind of modern Tibetan poetry in the 90s. I begin to start in the 90s, but I didn't know much about this format of new poems at that time.
안에 디라 예시 짜지 인고 주디 갈라 네 년나 사바데 이게 니스 요야기 인고 지치바 이스.
Then until around the 21st century, then I started to use or to study this kind of modern poetry.
안에 메르파 년나 라디칼라 년나 소주지바 마임바 년나 사바데 소유마 따로타 차바 있잖아요. 안에 이제 니쇼베기 년나 줄마 잠리 줄 안에 디라가 잠리 줄 잠미 존리 로주 데서 강가 나라 이제네 장바 있어.
Because not only study, I need to also teach others. So that's why during the time that I have a chance to study like history of world literature and literature theories in the early 21st century.
근데 디라 쪼제베기 런제르르 장리 이나자 근데 디라 쪼고베 남게 모예르르 장리 이나자 차예르르 장리 이나자 롱슈르르 장리 이나자 세토르르 장리 이나자 안에 디라 예시베 놀로기 디라르르 장리 이나자 디라 예시베 모예르르 장리 이나자 그래서 니치 장비 콩치바 있어.
So during the time I have the chance to study, the literature theory about naturalism and surrealism, postmodernism, realism, and expressionism, and other literature theories at that time.
근데 들이 가서 야파 년나 차가 지기 가르치는 제우서는 가서 배발 비치를 샤면 살아 봉크게 나체 송사 된다 시게 제사다 중에 매발 있는 게 착하게 요리스 샤면 살아 봉크 나체
지금 내가 경청 지표라. 내가 경청 지인다 그
냐가 랑에 자리 랑에 캬바 매바 있잖아 다 내가 볼로무지 냐가 사하치기 요리스
He just to be humble, saying like because of there's no other people to teach Tibetan poetry in our society, so I'm the one. Even I didn't know well, but I'm the one who teach the Tibetan poetry.
근데 다 당계시에 받기 놀러네 소주기 자리 단단 안저 배발라 칸지 주에나 다때 자식 같이 차서 소포로 요레스 제바레스
And as I mentioned before, the classical Tibetan poetry, actually what we have in Tibetan, there are also maybe 90% you have in Mongolia, the classical poetry.
Yes.
근데 소주의 치료당 카타다 면에 차대와 있잖아 소포당 대반이 치료도 전에 각각 잡아차디 장리라 잡아치장 차대
Because this kind of classical poetry is highly related to the Dharma. So and also the cultural background, the Dharma and cultural background between Tibet and Mongolia is quite similar. So it also shows the similarity in our literature.
근데 지체 다단텔라 남바소는 게 tamshela 냥카페바텔 지체 나라가 오케다시 나라 쳔모데 지기 놀로라 간다고 미태쳐 지기야 안에 비백이 냥아 셰사라와테 나랑에네 셰나 개와 좀보이 정말 뒤지체스 하고도 고전동에 고노도 뒤지체스.
So in the end, just say thank you to everyone, and I really feel honored, and it's my great pleasure to have this kind of opportunity to share about Tibetan poetry in this well-known university. And yeah, thanks for all the listeners, especially the organizer of this event. Thank you.
지와스 지약 디체 까만 예시 조약 지자이 되네 까만 쫑아마도 매버리츠
Actually, I plan to leave 20 minutes for question and answer, but now it seems only 15 minutes left. So sorry, but anyway, if anyone has questions, you can raise.
No worries, Captain Che.